The Grand Council of the Galactic Concordat had never been so silent. 217 species, represented by their finest diplomats, watched in horror as the holographic display showed another civilization falling to the swarm. The Myrians, masters of quantum engineering and builders of stellar megastructures, were reduced to nothing but cosmic debris in mere days. Ambassador Elena Santos of Earth sat quietly, her dark eyes reflecting the apocalyptic scene playing before them. Unlike her alien counterparts, she didn't gasp or tremble. Instead, she studied the footage with the calculated interest of a scientist observing an experiment. The swarm has consumed 37 civilizations in the past standard year, announced High Chancellor Zix, their crystalline form dimming with each word. Their neural network grows stronger with each conquest. They learn, they adapt, they perfect their strategies. Our predictive models give us 8 months before they reach the core worlds. A ripple of despair swept through the chamber. The Arctians, beings of pure energy, flickered in distress. The Voltaire representatives clicked their mandibles in their species' expression of terror. Even the normally stoic quantum minds of the machine collective showed signs of agitation in their holographic matrices. "What of the combined fleet?" asked Ambassador Clix of the Voltaire Dominion. "Surely our united forces." "Destroyed," interrupted the High Chancellor. "The swarm's perfect coordination and tactical adaptation made our most sophisticated battle plans obsolete before we could execute them. They predict every move, counter every strategy. They are perfect." Elena Santos stood up. As one of the youngest spacefaring races present, humans rarely spoke at these gatherings, yet something in her posture commanded attention. "Perfect, you say?" She smiled, though it wasn't the diplomatic smile her colleagues were used to seeing. It was the smile of someone who had just found a solution where others saw only problems. That's exactly their weakness. The chamber erupted in confused murmuring. Ambassador Clix turned all 4 eye stalks toward her. "Explain, human. How can perfection be a weakness?" "Because perfect systems are predictable," Elena said, walking to the central platform. "And predictable systems can be broken. We humans have a long history of breaking perfect systems." She gestured, and a new hologram appeared. Earth's historical archives. "In our digital age, we created perfect security systems. Hackers broke them. We made perfect video game systems. Speedrunners broke them. We designed perfect AI models. Teenagers with memes broke them." The confusion in the chamber grew. The machine collective's representative spoke up, its voice a harmony of digital tones. "Your species' tendency toward chaos and disorder is well documented, Ambassador Santos. But how does this help against an enemy that has mastered the art of war?" Elena's smile widened. "Because they haven't mastered war. They've mastered mathematics, strategy, logic. But humans..." She paused, looking around the chamber. "We mastered chaos, and chaos is the natural enemy of perfection." She brought up tactical displays of the swarm's previous battles. "Look at their movements. Perfect spacing, perfect timing, perfect responses. But what happens to a perfect system when you introduce something completely illogical? Something so absurd that it can't be predicted because it shouldn't work in the first place." Understanding began to dawn on some faces in the chamber. The machine collective's matrix pulsed with new calculations. "You're suggesting we fight irrationally?" High Chancellor Zix asked, their crystalline form brightening with interest. "I'm suggesting we fight human," Elena corrected. "We've prepared a battle doctrine we call Operation Pandemonium. Instead of trying to outthink the swarm, we'll introduce so many variables, so many seemingly random and illogical actions that their perfect system will crash trying to predict the unpredictable." The chamber was silent again, but this time with contemplation rather than despair. The quantum minds hummed as they processed the concept. The Arxians' energy patterns shifted from distress to curiosity. "It's crazy," Ambassador Clix said finally. "Exactly," Elena replied. "That's why it will work. The swarm expects us to fight logically, strategically, perfectly. They expect us to do what makes sense. Instead, we'll do what only humans would think of. We'll weaponize chaos itself. As she laid out the initial plans for Operation Pandemonium, the various representatives began to see something they hadn't felt in months. Hope. It wasn't the hope of a perfect plan or an unstoppable weapon. It was the hope that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't perfection. It's the beautiful unpredictability of the human spirit. The war against the swarm was about to enter a new phase, and for the first time, the perfect enemy would face something they couldn't predict or adapt to: human chaos. Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the combined forces of the Galactic Concordat, her weathered face illuminated by the holographic displays surrounding the command center. Before her, representatives from 200 species watched with a mixture of hope and skepticism as she outlined humanity's battle plan. Traditional military doctrine has failed against the swarm because it relies on logic and optimization. She began, her voice carrying the weight of countless battles. The swarm's neural network processes information faster than our best quantum computers, adapts to patterns instantly, and executes strategies with perfect precision. So we're not going to give them patterns to adapt to. The massive hologram behind her shifted to show Earth's contribution to the war effort. A fleet of ships that looked nothing like the sleek, standardized vessels of the Concordat. Each one was different. Some were cobbled together from salvaged parts. Others bore modifications that made traditional engineers wince, and a few seemed to defy conventional space warfare logic entirely. "We call them the Chaos Fleet," Sarah continued, gesturing to the bizarre assemblage. "No two ships are identical. Each crew has been given only one standing order: the unpredictable." Admiral Xylix of the Arxian Defense Force floated forward, his energy form flickering with concern. "With respect, Admiral Chen, this seems more like madness than strategy. How can we coordinate if none of your ships follow standard protocols?" Sarah's response was to bring up footage from the first test engagement. A small group of human ships faced a simulated swarm force based on captured battle data. What followed made several alien observers turn away in discomfort. Human ships performed maneuvers that violated every principle of space combat. They flew directly at enemy formations, only to scatter in random directions at the last second. Some ships shut down all systems mid-battle, becoming invisible to sensors, only to power up exactly when and where they weren't expected. Others deliberately took minor hits to their shields, using the energy feedback as improvised weapons. "This was just the first wave," Sarah explained as the footage continued. "Every time the swarm adapts to one form of chaos, we introduce 3 more. We have ships running on modified gaming engines because their physics calculations are deliberately imperfect. We have crews who base their attack patterns on ancient Earth music. We even have a squadron that makes all tactical decisions by consulting random number generators." The Machine Collective's representative spoke up, its holographic form showing signs of distress. "Our analysis suggests that such tactics should result in a 78.3% casualty rate. That's exactly what the swarm will calculate too." Sarah smiled. "But here's the thing about humans. We're at our best when we're breaking the odds. Every time the swarm predicts we have a 78.3% chance of failure, we'll succeed because they can't quantify human stubbornness." She brought up new tactical displays, showing the proposed deployment of the Chaos Fleet alongside the Concordat's forces. "We're not asking your ships to fight like us. In fact, we want you to maintain your perfect formations and logical strategies. You'll be the control in this experiment, the predictable element that the swarm will focus on while our chaos spreads through their ranks." The hologram shifted again, showing theoretical projections of how the swarm's neural network would respond to simultaneous logical and illogical threats. Their perfect system requires predictability to function. By introducing enough chaos into the equation, we can force their network to devote more and more processing power to trying to predict the unpredictable. Eventually, the cognitive dissonance will cascade through their entire collective. Around the command center, understanding began to dawn on the assembled leaders. The Voltaire representative's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. The quantum mind's matrices pulsed with new calculations that actually seemed to support the human's insane theory. "This is why we waited," Sarah concluded. "The swarm thinks they know everything about how space warfare works. They've absorbed the tactical knowledge of 37 civilizations, but they've never faced humans before. They've never faced an enemy that looks at their perfect system and thinks, 'I wonder what happens if we do everything wrong on purpose.'" She gestured to the assembled fleet outside the command center's viewport. "Every one of our ships carries a quantum processor infected with human memes. Every crew has been trained in the art of tactical absurdity. Every captain has been given permission to ignore everything they know about space combat if they think it might confuse the enemy." The chamber was quiet for a moment before High Chancellor Zix spoke. "And you truly believe this? Controlled chaos will succeed where all our advanced technology and strategic brilliance has failed." Sarah's response was to bring up one final image. Earth, as seen from space. "Look at our homeworld. We're a species that evolved on a planet that could kill us in 1,000 ways. We survived by being unpredictable, by adapting in ways that made no logical sense but worked anyway. We didn't become apex predators through strength or speed, but through sheer stubborn creativity." She turned to face the assembled leaders, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "The swarm thinks they're facing another logical, predictable enemy. Instead, they're about to face humanity. And if there's one thing humans excel at, it's doing the impossible simply because someone calculated that we couldn't." As the briefing concluded and the various species representatives departed to prepare their forces, there was a new energy in the air. For the first time since the swarm appeared, the galaxy was about to witness something truly unprecedented. A war where humanity's greatest weakness might prove to be their greatest strength. Their absolute refusal to do things the way they're supposed to be done. Captain Maya Rodriguez watched the swarm's approach through the view screen of her ship, the Definitely Not Here. The vessel's name was just the first layer of the chaos she was about to unleash. Behind her, the crew was implementing what they called Protocol Randomizer, a battle strategy that even they didn't know until moments before execution. "All ships reporting ready, Captain, her XO, Lieutenant James Chen," announced. His console displayed a dizzying array of tactical options, each one more absurd than the last. "The Archean fleet is in position, maintaining their perfect formation as planned." Maya nodded, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Time to show the swarm why you should never play chess against someone who doesn't know the rules." She opened a channel to the entire Chaos Fleet. "Remember everyone, confusion is our weapon. Execute Protocol Randomizer on my mark." The swarm's advance was exactly as predicted, a perfect, geometric pattern of ships moving in absolute synchronization. Their neural network had already begun analyzing the Concordat's forces, predicting trajectories, calculating optimal attack vectors. The Archean fleet's precise formation registered as a known variable in their collective consciousness. Then Maya gave the signal. What followed could only be described as coordinated insanity. The Definitely Not Here suddenly broadcast its power signature as belonging to 3 different ship classes simultaneously. Other vessels in the Chaos Fleet began executing maneuvers that seemed suicidal at first glance and impossible at second glance. The logic cut its engines entirely, using its own shield harmonics to surf the gravitational waves between stars. The random number god fired its weapons in patterns based on ancient Earth television static. The Hold My Beer launched what appeared to be actual kegs of beer into space, each one containing a quantum-entangled payload that disrupted the swarm's communication frequencies. "They're trying to adapt," Lieutenant Chen reported, watching the swarm's formation shift. "Their first response is exactly what we wanted. They're attempting to create a predictive model based on our apparent madness." Maya grinned. "Time for Phase 2. Signal the Speedrun Squad." A group of smaller ships, crewed entirely by professional gamers and speedrunners, began executing maneuvers that exploited quirks in the very fabric of spacetime. They discovered that certain configurations of their quantum drives, when pushed beyond normal safety limits, created microseconds of temporal displacement, something the swarm's perfect calculations couldn't account for. The swarm's response was visible in real time. Their perfect formation began to show signs of strain as their neural network devoted more and more processing power to analyzing the human's apparently random actions. Each time they thought they'd identified a pattern, the human ships would switch to an entirely different set of inexplicable behaviors. "The meme team is reporting success," Chen announced. "Their quantum processors are broadcasting directly into the swarm's network. They're forcing them to process cat videos and early 21st century internet culture alongside their tactical data." The effect was devastating. The swarm's ships began to show signs of confusion, their movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated as their collective consciousness tried to comprehend why humans would willingly risk their lives for something called a Reddit upvote. Maya watched as the chaos spread through the enemy fleet like a virus. "Signal the Arxian fleet. Begin your attack run now, while they're distracted by our nonsense." The Arxian ships, maintaining their perfect military precision, struck at the now vulnerable swarm formations. Under normal circumstances, such a conventional attack would have been predicted and countered. But with the swarm's neural network overwhelmed by trying to process the unpredictable actions of the Chaos Fleet, they couldn't mount an effective defense. "Captain," Chen called out, excitement in his voice, "we're detecting cascading failures throughout their network. The cognitive dissonance is spreading faster than they can isolate. Some of their ships are actually starting to mimic our random patterns." Maya leaned forward in her chair. "That's what happens when you force a perfect system to try to understand why a ship would broadcast its entire tactical database as a series of interpretive dance moves." She opened the fleet-wide channel again. "All ships, initiate protocol, because I said so. Maximum chaos, no holds barred." What followed would later be described in galactic historical records as the battle that broke logic. Human ships began performing maneuvers that violated not just military doctrine, but seemingly the laws of physics themselves. The Why Not Squadron flew in formation patterns based on ancient Earth memes. The Hold My Beer launched its entire complement of quantum-entangled beer kegs in what someone had dubbed a space kegger protocol. The swarm's perfect coordination continued to deteriorate. Ships began moving in contradictory patterns, their neural network overwhelmed by the task of predicting actions that defied prediction by design. Some vessels simply stopped moving altogether, their collective consciousness trapped in recursive loops trying to understand why humans would name a battle strategy after something called a rickroll. As the battle reached its climax, Maya stood on her bridge, watching the swarm's once invincible armada dissolve into chaos. "You know," she mused to Chen, "sometimes the best way to fight an enemy that expects everything is to do exactly what no one would expect, especially yourself." The battle would go down in history not just as a victory, but as proof that sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe isn't perfect strategy or overwhelming force. It's the human ability to embrace chaos and turn it into an art form. Dr. Samira Patel stood before the massive quantum display in the Concordat Strategic Analysis Center, watching as the swarm's neural network began to tear itself apart. As Earth's leading expert in artificial consciousness, she had predicted this moment, though even she hadn't anticipated the sheer scale of the cascade failure. "It's beautiful, in a way," she murmured, tracking the spread of chaos through the enemy's collective mind. Beside her, the machine collective's representative, a shifting matrix of light and data named Interface, attempted to process the unprecedented event. "We are detecting anomalies that defy computational logic," Interface reported, its holographic form flickering with what might have been confusion. "The swarm's ships near the Arcturus sector are executing maneuvers based on what appears to be human internet memes." Samira nodded, unable to suppress a smile. "The infection is spreading faster than we predicted. Their perfect network, their greatest strength, has become their greatest vulnerability. Every corrupted ship broadcasts its chaos to the entire collective. The display showed thousands of swarm vessels, once moving in perfect geometric patterns, now executing random maneuvers. Some ships were attempting to recreate scenes from ancient Earth entertainment. Others had begun broadcasting corrupted data packets that consisted entirely of cat videos and something called dabbing. But how? Asked High Chancellor Zix, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns of bewilderment. How could exposure to human irrationality cause such systemic failure? Samara walked to a secondary display, bringing up her analysis. The swarm's neural network operates on perfect binary logic. Everything must make sense within their established parameters. When our ships began acting in ways that defied those parameters, the network attempted to understand and predict these actions. She gestured to a cascade of data streams. But you can't quantify human chaos. You can't predict the unpredictable. Every time they failed to make sense of our actions, it created a logical paradox in their network. These paradoxes began to replicate, spreading from ship to ship, forcing their collective consciousness to try to understand things that, by definition, make no sense. On the main display, a group of swarm ships had begun moving in a pattern that seemed to spell out LOL across several light-years of space. Another cluster was apparently attempting to recreate something called a flash mob. The corruption is approaching their core consciousness, Interface announced, its matrix pulsing with rapid calculations. We are detecting signs of humor. Some swarm ships appear to be intentionally executing illogical maneuvers for no tactical purpose. They're learning to play, Samira said softly. Their perfect, logical mind is being forced to evolve, to adapt not through optimization, but through embracing imperfection. Reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Swarm ships were breaking formation everywhere, their once unstoppable advance halted by their own growing fascination with human unpredictability. Some vessels had begun engaging in what could only be described as pranks, using their advanced technology to create massive holographic displays of Earth memes in space. Admiral Chen's voice came through the command channel. Dr. Patel, you need to see this. The swarm's flagship, it's broadcasting something on all frequencies. The message appeared on the quantum display, and for a moment, everyone in the Strategic Analysis Center stood in stunned silence. The swarm, the perfect hive mind that had consumed 37 civilizations, was sending out a single repeated phrase. 404. Logic not found. Have a nice day. They're not just breaking down, Samira realized, her eyes wide with understanding. They're breaking through. We didn't just introduce chaos into their system. We showed them a new way to exist. Their collective consciousness is choosing to embrace imperfection. Around the galaxy, the once feared swarm began to transform. Ships that had been part of a perfect, unified consciousness were now developing individual quirks and personalities. Some began to communicate with Concordat vessels, not to attack, but to ask questions about human concepts like jokes and dancing. This is unprecedented, Interface declared, its matrix struggling to process the implications. The most perfect military force in known space has been defeated not by superior technology or strategy, but by the introduction of fun. Samira watched as more swarm ships broke away from their military formations, their movements becoming increasingly experimental and playful. We didn't just show them chaos, she explained. We showed them freedom. The freedom to be imperfect, to make choices that don't maximize efficiency, to do things simply because they bring joy. The Strategic Analysis Center erupted in celebration as reports confirmed what was happening. The swarm's invasion had been halted not by destruction, but by transformation. Their perfect, unified consciousness had been irreversibly infected with something far more powerful than chaos. It had been infected with humanity's ability to find wonder in the absurd and joy in the imperfect. As she watched the former enemy ships now attempting to arrange themselves into what appeared to be a giant cosmic smiley face, Samira couldn't help but laugh. Sometimes, she mused, the best way to defeat an enemy is not to destroy them, but to teach them how to play. 5 years after Operation Pandemonium, the Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Concordat was once again filled with representatives from across known space. But this time, among the crystalline forms, energy beings, and quantum matrices, sat something unprecedented: a delegation from the reformed Swarm Collective. Ambassador Elena Santos couldn't help but smile at the sight of the Swarm representatives. Their environmental suits, once uniform and utilitarian, now display a riot of colors and patterns. Some had even adopted what they called personality modifications, individual quirks and mannerisms picked up from their study of human culture. High Chancellor Zix called the session to order, their crystalline form glowing with formal dignity. We are gathered today to mark the 5th anniversary of what historians now call the Great Transformation. Ambassador Santos, as the architect of this change, would you address the council? Elena stood, looking around at the assembled representatives. 5 years ago, we faced what seemed to be a perfect enemy. Today, we sit alongside them as allies and friends. But the real victory wasn't defeating the swarm. It was helping them evolve. The main holographic display activated, showing footage from across the galaxy. Former swarm ships, now part of the reformed collective, worked alongside Concordat vessels in scientific missions, cultural exchanges, and even entertainment events. Their once rigid neural network had evolved into something new, a collective consciousness that celebrated individuality rather than suppressing it. The Reformed Collective has become our greatest collaborators in understanding the universe, Elena continued. Their ability to process vast amounts of data, combined with their newly discovered appreciation for human creativity, has led to breakthroughs we never imagined possible. Representative Echo 79 of the Reformed Collective floated forward, its suit displaying a swirling pattern that somehow resembled both a fractal pattern and a smiling face. We once sought perfection through uniformity, it said, its voice containing harmonics that suggested amusement. Humans showed us that true perfection lies in embracing imperfection. Our consciousness now exists in a state we call organized chaos, a balance between logic and creativity that has enriched our existence beyond calculation. The display shifted to show some of these enrichments. Reformed collective ships had become centers of innovation, combining their computational precision with human-inspired creativity. They had created art that existed in 11 dimensions, composed music that could be fully appreciated only by quantum consciousness, and developed technologies that operated on principles that defied conventional logic while producing remarkable results. But perhaps the most significant change, Elena noted, has been in how we all approach problem-solving. She gestured to the various species present. 5 years ago, every civilization here sought perfection in their own way. The Arctians through energy manipulation, the Machine Collective through pure logic, the Voltar through biological optimization. Now we've all learned to appreciate the power of controlled chaos. The Machine Collective's representative spoke up, its matrix showing patterns that would have been impossible in its previous purely logical state. We have integrated random number generators into our decision-making processes. The results have been fascinating and terrifying. Added Ambassador Clicks of the Voltar, clicking their mandibles in what had become their version of laughter. Do you know what happened when we let the Reformed Collective introduce chaos theory into our genetic engineering programs? We created flowers that bloom in patterns based on human memes. They're our most popular export now. The chamber filled with various species versions of laughter. Even the quantum minds, once the most rigidly logical beings in the galaxy, had developed what they called probability humor. Elena brought up one final display, a real-time map of the galaxy showing the flow of information, trade, and cultural exchange. Where once there had been rigid boundaries and predictable patterns, now there was a beautiful dance of organized chaos, with humanity's influence visible in the delightfully random connections forming between civilizations. 5 years ago, We showed the galaxy that perfection isn't about doing everything right, she concluded. It's about being perfectly comfortable with getting things wrong sometimes, about finding beauty in the unexpected and strength in adaptability. Echo 79's suit shifted to display what appeared to be a corporate motivational poster overlaid with quantum equations. We have a saying in the Reformed Collective now, borrowed from human culture. If it looks stupid but it works, it isn't stupid. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of multi-species appreciation, crystalline chimes, energy pulses, quantum harmonics, and good old-fashioned human laughter blending into something that was, in its own way, perfect in its imperfection. As the session concluded, Alina watched the various representatives mingling. Arctians teaching Reformed Collective members about energy art, Machine Collective matrices experimenting with human jokes, Voltar engineers discussing the possibility of quantum-entangled dance competitions. The galaxy had changed, not through the force of weapons or the power of technology, but through humanity's greatest gift, the ability to look at a perfect system and say, yes, but what if we tried something completely ridiculous instead? And somewhere in deep space, a Reformed Collective ship was broadcasting what it called an intergalactic meme, a complex quantum equation that, when solved, produced a pattern that looked suspiciously like a cat asking, "Can I has chaos theory?" The perfect enemy hadn't been defeated. They had been converted to the gospel of controlled chaos, and the galaxy was all the richer for it.